Hey guys, how's it going? So today we're going to be talking about what's called a conditional verb. Specifically, we're going to focus on the verbs if and when. For those of you that are not sure as to what conditional means, we're just going to go over it very briefly. Essentially, what it is telling you that for an event or for something to occur or happen, certain conditions need to be met. So as a quick example is for me to be happy, I need to exercise. So my happiness in that example is dependent on exercise, right? Okay, so the lighting in here. Anywho, we're going to go ahead and take a look at one example of a conditional sentence. This is called a zero conditional sentence. Simply put, think of these as like a scientific version of the conditional sentence types, because there are a few types. And when I say scientific, what I mean is in science, ideally, you're dealing with what are called 100% truths, meaning for something to happen in science, there usually is a definitive action step required for that thing to happen. So let me be more specific, like in the example that I give, where if water freezes, it becomes ice. Now, in this sentence, it's 100% true. However, keep in mind, as with most things, there's always going to be exceptions, but still, for the sake of argument, we're going to go ahead and just assume that it's 100% true. Alrighty, so let's break down the sentence. I have if water freezes, so if is going to be my conditional. And keep in mind, you can also interchange if with the verb when. So when water freezes, it becomes ice also works. However, in this example, again, I'm using if. So if water freezes, it becomes ice. Okay, for that would be 100% true. Now the format for a zero conditional sentence is pretty basic. Again, you're gonna go ahead and, if I can get a grip on my pen. Now the format for a zero conditional sentence is pretty straightforward. So you're gonna start with your conditional verb, which can be interchanged. So I'm gonna write if or when, okay? And then you are going to have your subject, which in this example is water. And then you're going to have your base verb. And there's a reason I'm writing base verb. It's actually pretty important. So, and we'll go over that in just a second. And then the second half of the sentence, where we have it becomes ice, I'm going to follow it with my subject, which I'm referring back to with it, plus, again, my base, my base verb. All right, it's very exciting watching me write. So now I'm consistent in saying base verb because you cannot change the tense of the verb in a sentence like this. So in other words, I couldn't use a past tense or future tense. It's gotta be the base verb, right? It's infinitive, right? I should also mention that you'll notice in the verbs that I use, I end with an S in both cases because freeze and become are verbs, but I wrote freezes and becomes. And that's because in English we have the subject-verb agreement. So my subject in this case is water, which is singular. It's also an uncountable noun, but still it's singular, which means my verb, my linked verb, needs to be plural. Just as if I were to have a plural subject or plural noun, its associated verb would need to be singular. It would switch. They have to agree with each other. So this is why I've added the S. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the next style or next type. It's called a first conditional sentence. This runs opposite to zero conditional, where for certain events to occur, they always or 100% of the time must happen. Like for water to become ice, it has to freeze, right? That's 100% true. Whereas first conditional, it's more likely to occur, but not necessarily will occur 100% of the time. So it's probable. So the example I give is, if I go to the gym, I might go running. Okay, that may happen, it's likely to, but it's not 100% certain, okay? Now, you'll also notice I give several other examples. Might, may, will, and could. These are called modal verbs are likely to happen, or they suggest the possibility of something happening, but they do not give you a certainty of something happening. So the format for a first conditional sentence is essentially the same thing as our zero conditional, just with that slight difference towards the second half of the sentence. So let's go ahead and start with the first, where we're going to begin with our conditional verb. And again, it can be interchanged just like the first zero conditional sentence. So if or when, plus your subject, plus your base verb, because just like earlier, you can't change the tense of the verb in the conditional sentence, whether it's zero or first conditional. It does need to be the base verb. So no past tense, no future tense. Okay, now this is where there is a distinction between the zero conditional and the first conditional. Instead of following it with the subject and then the base verb, what you're going to do is you're going to follow it with the subject, the modal verb. So again, you're going to refer back to the subject, which in this case is I, plus the modal verb. Okay, so there are other types of conditional sentences. In fact, I believe there's like 4 or so. Feel free to chime in the comments if you'd like. But for today, we just focused on the zero conditional and the first conditional variety. Okay, thank you guys again. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording, and I wish you guys well, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.